start the next lecture. I would like to introduce you Professor Joseph Brown, who is the head of the Artificial Intelligence and Game Development Lab at our Innopolis University, and he will tell you about labor, lootboxes, and flights.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. On behalf of the faculty and staff at Innopolis, it's really great to see you all coming out to join us here for the Global Game Jam, and especially big thanks to the organizers, because this is something that they've been working on for years. We have students, former students, who've kind of built this, and I think this is what, the only site in Russia for it, if I'm not mistaken? No, not the only one? Oh, come on. Okay, great. One of the most popular sites in Russia for this. We've been it's really great to see kind of development that happens. And around October, we also kind of do the Proc Jam. And I know that we're the only site in Russia that does Proc Jam. And I also know that we're the only university in Russia right now that actually has a lab that's on the technical games ranking list. So we're the only place that has a lab that has some recognition from the rest of the international community in terms of research on games. So you may be wondering, why do I got such a goofy hat on? And to me, this is kind of like, when I was asked to do this presentation, I said, what do you guys want me to talk about? Do you guys just want me to talk about what's going on in my lab? Do you guys want me to talk about something different? They're like, something different, Dr. Brown, please. Because I've done so many speeches on kind of like, player engagement and on development of content and procedural content generation. And I know Hannah had her great presentation earlier today on some of the work that's happening in our lab. And so I wanted to look at something different. And this is known as a poor boy cap. It's also known as a newsie. So this is me bringing you some of the news of the gaming industry right now that's kind of hitting the front page and that's affecting a lot of the people out there. And today I'm going to kind of focus on some of the bad news. Because we all are so happy that players are engaged with our games. We're so happy that there's so much choice out there. We're so happy that we have all these new great platforms to work with and we're developing these systems. But there's also a lot of poison out there in the industry these days. And I want to just kind of point out a few of them. And I'm really going to focus on 3 different companies. I'm going to talk about Konami. I'm going to talk about EA. And I'm going to talk about Bethesda. And the 3 that I'm going to talk about, I will tell you right now, I love their games. This is not coming from a place of, let's destroy them all. This is coming from a place of, I love the stuff that they have created in the past. I love some of the stuff that they're doing now. It's just some of the actions that they're making are really toxic, not only for their own player base and for their own development, but it's toxic across the entire games industry. And so I want to start to kind of point out a few of these things. And I'm going to start off with labor. I think some of you have seen this hashtag that's out there now. Okay, for those of you that have your Twitter boxes, go in with that hashtag because that'll be fun. And their labor practices and what they're up to. So I think we're familiar that Kojima left Konami and that there was a whole big issue when Kojima, the great director, he did Metal Gear, many, many years of that, and now it's basically just pachinko machines that they're kind of working on these days, right? But I want to get into, what is it like to be a dev at Konami? Because we're getting more and more leaks coming out of there. The first one is, and this has been actually a rather long-standing practice, you don't have a personal email. So for example, I have jbrown@innopolis.ru. Their developers have a random string of characters at Konami. Even their PR personnel only have some random string of characters. So there's no way to actually communicate via email outside of the thing with people knowing who you are. I'm certain that that must be a really fun business card to have. That there's this random string. A lot of their computers, They're vetted and required to come from account, random arrangements, and they also have a best by date, so your email will die in about a year for that, they're saying. The majority of their technical machines where they're actually doing programming and code are air-gapped from the internet. And their argument for this is we can't let people cause leaks outside of it. But there's a few other business practices that are just kind of very weird. They're monitoring workplace absences, and this is not even just absences like, I'm not there today. This is, I went to the washroom and it took me, 8 minutes rather than your prescribed 5 minutes. They're using time cards to work against this. So they're monitoring people's bathroom breaks and lunch breaks via cameras in this. And do you know how they deal with people who take too long of a lunch break or take too long of a washroom break? Company-wide emails. Company-wide emails saying public shaming, yes. Now, remember, the majority of this is also happening in Japan. And if we look at, for example, the Japanese culture, public shaming is even more effective than other cultures, that there is this kind of communal life that they have. Workplace absences, deaths have been shifted into menial tasks. So security guards, their security guard might have worked on the last Metal Gear. Their security guard might be, washing, or their developers might be washing toilets in their off time. And they use this as another way of control and punishment. They've been monitoring staff also outside on their own personal accounts. So if you decide, hey, I don't want to have the, random characters at Konami, but I want to use my own personal Twitter account, they're monitoring those. They're watching their staff's personal accounts. And in one case, they had staff who liked a message from a former dev who said, hey, I got this great new job at this other games place. Those people were shifted around to different appointments, some of them into menial labor within the company, building pachinko machines. And they've been monitoring also former employees. They've been noticing to their new employers, hey, this guy used to work at Konami and he's a real jerk. And coming up with all of this stuff to talk about them. And they're really going after Kojima's team. Because, of course, a lot of them left when Kojima did as well from Kojima Productions. So this isn't just an issue of Kojima left and there's now all this kind of, back and forth on this. I think there was the one most recent news with Kojima was he went out and they said, do you have anything to do, he was asked at a public event, do you have anything to do with Metal Gear Survive? And he went, no. And now they're going after him for saying that that was a disparaging remark. Because he said, I am not involved with that. And they said, of course he was involved. He built the whole, universe and boo. So that's a disparaging remark. Noting that this is the same Kojima that they said, he's got nothing to do with the Metal Gear Solid. We don't need him. Just not even a year ago. So there's some real problems that are happening inside of Konami. You can also find this on YouTube. This is a scene from their most recent Metal Gear Survive. And in the start of Metal Gear Survive, one of the characters brings out this list of various teams. Who here's familiar with kind of the Metal Gear naming policy for your units? Who's played like Metal Gear 5 of some form? Okay. So one of the things that this has is usually it's adjective animal. So like solid snake, or, pouncing puma, or, I don't know, crazy aardvark, right? Like something along those lines. And in this one scene here, we see this list, and up at the top, it looks rather innocuous, right? But there's actually a hidden message inside of it, inside of the most recent Metal Gear Survive. And so if we look up here, we see MG, KIA. Metal Gear Killed in Action is what they're speculating that means. And here you can say KJP Forever. And this has actually appeared in a previous Metal Gear game. So if you went back in the Phantom Pain, you can go through and on it, if you collect all of the missing Mother Base soldiers, their code names also form Kojima Productions Forever. KJP forever. A couple of other interesting things, and I'll get into them. We have this vengeful mosquito up at the top, which I will talk more about. And at the bottom, we have two people here. Notice that Yota and Yuji don't seem to follow the pattern of animal names, right? Who's Yoja and Yuji? And why are they bastard and cunning? Which in Japanese is also a very deep insult to call someone cunning, who are considered AWOL. Well, that's the designers of Metal Gear Survive. And so, really what you have here is a message from one of the developers that is basically, help, I'm stuck in a universe factory. So they're believing that this is actually a developer that has been trying to put out some form of hidden message to the public about this. Now, here we see that one of these names doesn't really fit in, right? Vengeful Mosquito MIA. Again, if we go through the history of the Metal Gear franchise, and we look at the Phantom Pain and even the earlier Ground Zeroes, who's Mosquito? Mosquito is actually a very important name inside of this franchise. Introduced in mission number 22 in Phantom Pain, he can also be found in some of the earlier games, and he's seen in Ground Zeroes. And the history of this is, in that mission, he takes over the big base, and you have to capture him in order to reclaim the base. And at the end they say, why did he do that? Why did he attack us? And the answer is, he was believed to have been betrayed in the previous game. And he creates his own private strike force in order to get revenge. So what fits better than a message being from Vengeful Mosquito, from a vengeful person who has been betrayed? And so really, the hidden message in this is, from one who's been betrayed and is now missing in action, Metal Gear is dead, Kojima Productions forever, curse you to Yoda and Yuji who are not stepping in to prevent this. Is what they're saying that the message is kind of decoding into. Now, you may say, this looks like a conspiracy theory. Yeah. And it is. But there's precedence for this inside of games, that developers have used the game itself or elements within the game as a method to get back at bosses. So they have used this. Simcopter had the very famous Memo Pledge, as they called it. And this was an activist group decided that what would happen is, on certain dates within the game, that a bunch of topless guys would come out, and if they bump into each other, they make kissing noises. And he was actually paid to put this in to the game via an activist group, because he was basically fed up with his job, and he said, yeah, sure, I'll do this. So this is a very famous glitch inside of this, or Easter egg, depends on which way you want to go. Another example of this, Patchacom over here, 5% of the game code, or what has actually reached the cartridge, 5% of that is actually just a big, giant, long, expletive-laced rant against his bosses. So, of course, all of the comments and etc., when you compile, are still kind of there within the code, just inside of there. So he wrote this big, huge comment in the code of a letter basically saying, you know, you guys can stuff it, blah, 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 and this and that, and put it in. And if you go and you look at this with looking at every single byte within the cartridge, you can find his commented out rant inside of it. So either this has been subliminal, liminal, or out in the open from other developers. I think there's also some of the comments of, like, you know, some people say, well, hot coffee falls under this, but that was actually meant as a game thing that they then pulled away. There's been a lot of examples of this, especially in comic books and Disney, where they will put hidden words into clouds and things, like, you know, various words that if I was to say, we'd have to start putting bleeps on the YouTube video, so I'm not going to do that. Okay? So there is kind of this history of these kind of subliminal images. And as I said before, this message here of KJP forever has already appeared in the series before. So in terms of, is this a conspiracy? Well, they did it before in a previous game when Kojima was working with. So I think this is more of just a homage to that, adding a couple of extra facts into the case. Okay. So, how many of you want to work for Kojima or for Konami now? Doesn't matter?
Like, it's all subject to change. Like, there's
all subject to change, okay.
Yeah.
So you're all set to sign on for Konami?
Why not?
Okay, that's fine. Anybody else? No, pretty scary, right? Okay. The EA and loot boxes. Oh my goodness, where to begin with this? So loot boxes have kind of a historical backing to them, and I put their roots all the way back into like Magic the Gathering and a lot of these collectible card games, where they kind of introduce collectible cards coming in packs. They have a definition of rare, uncommon, and common, and the evolution of this actually comes through if you look at the original Diablo pitch document. It came out at the Game Developers Conference in 2016. They put out the original Condor Digital Incorporated pitch document for Diablo. And if you haven't seen this, it's a really good read if you want to kind of get like a historical look at this. But one of the elements in that has to do with the marketing of Diablo, how they'll monetize it. And one of the pieces in that is we will have floppy drives at the counters of various stores, and it will have on it a couple of monsters, it'll have an item, it'll have something inside the procedural content generator, the level generator, that you can add into your game. And so this already way back at the start of Diablo, they were starting to look into DLC, monetization of the DLC, and loot boxes. And their comment is, it can be just like Magic the Gathering. So they're already starting to think about that way back when. And this is Blizzard. What's Blizzard kind of known for these days?
Esports. StarCraft.
StarCraft, yeah.
Hearthstone.
Hearthstone, yeah. Overwatch, yeah. Do we see loot boxes in a lot of these?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? So they were already thinking way back when how to do that. And in fact, just recently I published a paper kind of looking at the pitch document and all of the links into current gaming trends and how that kind of affects it. So if you're interested in that deeper, come and find me and I'll give you the link to the paper. But in some countries, it's getting to the point where there really needs to be elements of gambling.
They must publish the drop rates of the rates.
Right. So China's gotten to the point where they're just saying, please tell us how bad your system is. Belgium is outlawing it. And just recently there was a conference of about 16 different European Union, England, a few of the Crown dependencies that met with the gambling regulators. And they're looking on how do they introduce legislation into these nations where they will say that loot boxes are of this type, at least, are illegal. Belgium's already done this, the Netherlands has already done this. Now you'd say, well, I don't really care about Belgium and the Netherlands. But what happens when that starts expanding across the European Union? Look at what happened with the European Union data privacy laws that are happening right now. Look at how much that's really affected how you use the internet now. How many of you received an email from at least one site that you go to that says, under the new EU regulations, I have to ask you whether you want to receive email? Yeah. How many of you go to a website and it now says, we're going to give you cookies, please click this, and you have to get past it, right? Yeah, right? That's because of that legislation. Are we in the European Union? No. Not yet. Okay, thank you. That's good. I like the direction you're headed in. Okay.
Even though you know it's not yet us.
Oh, okay. One of the two. One of the two. Okay. But even in North America, this has been causing real problems. I work, for example, on the IEEE for conferences. And we were having to deal with, well, how do we inform people that the conference that they've been going to for 10 years now, that we would like to still send them the, hey, the conference is going to be at this time email, without violating European anti-spam regulations and data protections, right? We've seen this sort of issue even inside of Russia, right? Like LinkedIn's blocked.
Yeah.
Everybody uses it. You know, turn on the VPN, go to LinkedIn. But it is blocked in Russia because it's not following Russia's laws against this, right? So there has been these sorts of blocks. Telegram, right? There was a big, huge attempt to block Telegram. How did that work? Didn't. Okay. But what happens is, when you have these sorts of big blocks, like the European Union, if they start to all pass laws that say loot boxes are illegal, we're going to start to see real changes inside of this. Because what's going to happen is, look at the nations where FIFA is played. Right? Where are the nations that FIFA is going to be highly active in? That's where they're making a lot of their money, EA, is on the FIFA. And they basically said, we will ignore Belgian law. We're not doing anything to work with it. They said, we're in open defiance of it. So Valve and Blizzard and a lot of them have just turned off the ability to get loot boxes in Belgium, and they're waiting for this to just all slide over, and EA is saying, we defy you. Guess what's happening now? Belgium's going to everybody else and going, hey, let's deal with it. Let's put something in place against it. So EA is right now leading the charge for the elimination of loot boxes by putting out more and more loot boxes in open defiance of various countries' laws. So they are kind of their own worst enemies in this. Take a look at this. How much is this card, or this pack, the Premium Jumbo Gold pack? How much is it?
$10, $5, something like that.
Where does it say?
Yeah, FIFA points, 300 FIFA points. What is this? I don't know.
What is this? I don't know. Right? How much are you being charged?
300 bucks?
300 bucks?
It depends.
Yeah.
Depends?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have coins, you can buy it in game. Like
You have coins, you can buy it with game. Yeah, but look at the difference between FIFA points or coins, right?
Yeah.
So how much gameplay, how many hours of gameplay does 1,500 points cost? Some number of hours. Okay, so from just this, can you tell me how much any of these are worth? No.
Some of them gold, some of them silver, but
Right. So you don't know what you're getting, and you don't know how much it costs. Wow. These are casino-like tactics. So they're trying to say, we are not gambling. Okay. Then why are you doing the same things casinos do in order to make money off of players? One of the things, why do casinos use chips?
you don't know how much you're losing.
You don't know how much well, you do, because it's on the chip, right? The number's on the chip.
It's easy to lose chips.
It's easy to lose chips, okay, but I can drop rubles on the floor too, right?
No, it's harder.
It's harder? Okay. Why do companies really like it when you use credit cards instead of cash?
Tracking.
The main reason?
Yeah.
Since it's just psychological.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, not even about the credit card, but about all these chips and so on and so on. It's much
Sure.
more easier for you to spend
Yeah.
this
These chips, right? It's monopoly money.
It's
It's
100% its value, actually.
Yeah.
Even more if you have, for example, chain with these chips, it's make it more understandable for you the value of next chip.
right. So part of it is they all look relatively like. They're different multicolored ones. They're all colorful and playful. They don't seem real. If I put rubles in your hands, do you see that as real money?
Of course.
No? Okay. If I put American dollars in your hands, Huh?
I remember money and value in pizzas.
Pizza. If I put a pizza in front of you, you know how much that's worth.
Kind of.
Okay.
It's worth one pizza.
It's worth one pizza, yeah. But the point of this is, they try to put, again, as you said, that sort of psychological distance between you spending actual money and spending points. Right? So they never want to show in their shop how much that thing is actually worth or how much you're spending. Casinos don't want you to really understand how much you're spending. They want you to have that psychological think time to go, how much is that chip worth again? How much is that? How much did I pay for those FIFA chips? And it also disassociates the act of buying from the act of paying. So this is why credit card companies like plastic. Because what happens is you're more likely to spend more with plastic than you are with actual paper currency. This is a known phenomenon inside of humans. So because of this and this disassociation, it's hard to keep track of spending. And in fact, just recently, a few different problem gamblers, I guess you could call them at this point with the loot boxes, have been using EU privacy regulations to go back to EA and say, how much did I actually spend? Because they're not keeping track of that even in their own accounts. And they were absolutely shocked at how much they were actually spending. And you hear the same thing from problem gamblers. When you ask them to keep track of your actual spending on the gaming and on the gambling, they're always super shocked at how much money they actually put against it. If you went to someone that smokes cigarettes, and you said, how much are you paying per week for cigarettes? Any vice. People get very shocked when they see the actual figures of how much they're putting against these sorts of things. And again, I'm not here to say don't have hobbies or don't have fun. I'm just saying understand that there is this sort of disassociation. Developers can also give away these tokens as perks. Right? Casinos do this too. Free drinks. Free $50 play at the tables. Because it costs them almost nothing. And what will happen is, because I gave you 10, Eno points, then what will happen is you'll go and buy an extra 30 Eno points to buy the 40 Eno point thing you want. So if I start you out in this, by even giving you a small amount, I'm then encouraging you to get the next bit.
Or razor and blades. You buy, sells a cheap razor by $1 and $10 blades.
Yeah. Right. Sir, yes.
Looks like it's kind of evil industry, but as a guy from inside, by the way, I even worked with company about 15 years ago, but in this case, what can I say? Actually, if I know this very well since I'm the guy who make stuff like this. If we are taking from the all amount of people who are paying in the virtual game, in the medium game, it will be kind of 3%. So
right.
I want to say that 97% doesn't pay you nothing.
Sure.
But you put a lot of effort as a developer to make all this stuff.
Right.
Almost nobody pay money. And you can say me, okay, but that's fine, but let's do it in some good way. Not.
Yeah. I agree.
And the last comment is actually if we will take a look at this 3% who is paying about the half of the money, paying 1% of this 3%. And you know what? For these guys who can spend about, let's say, $100,000 in a game, it's not their last money. Absolutely. They even don't care about this one. It's not some poor guys who sell their hand or something like to.
No, I sure. I am not saying this to demonize at the end of the day. I'm just trying to point this out. But what I will say is, I don't know if I fully agree with you that everybody has that money to be putting against it. Because some of the examples of this were 19-year-olds or children that were using their parents' credit cards for this and didn't have an association. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but if you have the statistics and want to share them with the group, then I will gladly take a look at them. The big thing I will say is there has been some development groups that have gone out and have seen these types of what they call the whales, and they see people who are spending what they believe to be, huge amounts over top of this, and they've taken those systems out of their games or prevented that from happening.
Or just abuse it.
Yeah. But I think the big issue right now is it's going to be very hard to follow this sort of monetization pattern, because what's happening is the regulators are looking at this and they're really worried. So the statistics, they probably might say that, okay, this guy is a billionaire and he can spend, $100,000 on, points for these types of games. But there's other games that are also out there that are just working to develop this as a system. So their only existence as a game is to pull the points out, pull those codes out. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of third-party sites are actually just flat out going into gambling inside of the loot boxes.
Betting on the tournaments using your in-game items.
Yeah. So this is basically, you see this a lot, I think with CSGO was doing this for quite a while, and the developers are not putting in restrictions in place to deal with that. Because one of the things that you could do is like soul locking, where you can't trade for this much amount of time, or the price of the trade goes down, or there's some sort of stoppage that prevents this very quick movement of items. But they've even put forth these types of marketplaces and stores in order to allow for these third parties to exist. So I think we're going to see a lot of attacks on that. Okay, FIFA, just to show you kind of how that works. And one of the arguments too that has come out against EA, this is basically having to do with some of the games where this is basically a mechanic of the game is pay me more money. This is Battlefield 2. The big thing with this is in order to actually get another character inside of this game, it was approaching about 400 hours to unlock a character to get enough points in order to buy the loot drop to get the thing without paying more money to EA after paying for a $60 game. So this was designed by EA just to extract money.
Like mobile game, Dungeon Keeper?
Dungeon Keeper Online is another one that's kind of moved in that sort of direction. These are games that are basically designed in order to do this. And one of the things that they asked the developers was, why are you making such things in the games that are so consequential for actually playing the game? Because it was things like characters or weapons. You can play a stormtrooper for 400 hours in order to unlock a named character, or you can give me $20 and have it right now. This is after you'd already paid $60, $70. So what happens with these kids? They go to mom and dad and they say, I want to play Darth Vader. Right? Wouldn't you? I'd say, I want to play Darth Vader. Why am I playing this boring game where I can't play Darth Vader?
It's not Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. I can't play as Luke Skywalker. I can't play as Chewbacca. I can't play as my favorite character because I have to unlock them. I mean, if you started out like Mortal Kombat and there was Johnny Cage and the rest were just locked and pay me this much for all the rest of them, or play for 400 hours, that's what they were doing inside of this. And one of the comments was, why are they only focusing on these very consequential pieces to the game that would normally come with a $70 game and putting them behind a loot wall? Why can't they just make it cosmetic stuff that doesn't matter? And the response from the developers, you probably don't want Darth Vader in pink. No offense to pink, but I don't think that's right in the canon. So that was his response, is we can't just give you cosmetic things inside of the loot boxes and make it something beside the $70 game, because nobody, why would anyone want to make Darth Vader pink? And this is the response from players of the game, is that they went in and modded Darth Vader to be pink. And said, yeah, we want him. And I don't know, that looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
Pink Vader, okay. Now if you look at Pink Vader on, Google, you'll see a bunch of that through there. Okay.
That should also bring citation, why is those prices are so much in-game person? Because it gives sense of proud and accomplishment.
Yeah, right. It was things like, you spent 400 hours in this game. Is that an accomplishment, or is that my life has gone to waste to unlock Darth Vader? I don't know. Oh, Bethesda. Yes, sir.
So, these regulations in some countries, are they just against the loot boxes in general, or just against the loot boxes, which gives you an advantage against other players?
Well, this is the big issue, is that what's happened is the gambling regulators, because they are not game regulators and don't understand that there's appropriate mannerisms to use loot boxes, where, for example, our gentleman who just spoke before me was saying, hey, I've worked with companies and this is how they make their money, and they don't do it in a dangerous way, and this is how they get monetization. So there are good companies that still use some free-to-play mechanic. Okay, fine. And they do it in a responsible manner. But then you also have people like EA, they're just doing it for their. Gambling regulator does not care. They look at the mechanic of how it's done and they say this is gambling, and then they will just say all loot boxes are banned. So this is where it gets very dangerous for those free-to-play developers that are using this as a monetization source. Because if you have people, it basically amounts to this. You can have pretty much self-regulation, which is what a lot of the games industry does, right? We have the ESRB or the PAL system and etc. The games are submitted to it. We prevent, certain things from happening in games because we give that up. The reason why the ESRB and PAL and all of them were created was because the government says, if you didn't do that, we will step in. And so what's going to happen is, if we do not do, as developers, something in order to deal with these, exploitative loot box practices, if we don't do it, the government will. And here's the problem with that. Do they know what they're doing? This is, the same sort of people that say that the internet is not a big truck, it's made of tubes. This is the people when they ask, Zuckerberg on, can I delete that thing from Facebook? How does that happen? Yes, we've already implemented that. No, but what if I want to delete it? Yes, we've already implemented that, right? You have basically people that are up into, the majority of world leaders of any of these are usually not 20-something millennials that can, know how to use a toaster and can program their phone. This is like, can you tell me how to delete that file again? So I think it's, let me say this on the one side. There's a lot of danger in the loot boxes there on the side of developers in terms of, even if you are following good practices with it, EA could get you all banned, period. Bethesda. Oh, I love Bethesda. I love Fallout. I'm a huge Fallout fan. I haven't really played Skyrim, but I don't know, I like the dark future. I like the dark, horrible future of Fallout. And guess what I did? I pre-ordered Fallout 76. Don't cheer for that. Don't cheer for that, please.
Never pre-order.
You're getting ahead of the. You're getting ahead of me. Oh, jeez. So first of all, and I think this has kind of been the big thing, is that they came out and they said, we're going to have in the Vault-Tec, Power Armor Edition, we're going to give you a nice West-Tec canvas bag. Ooh. And they advertised this. Ooh. This is what you got. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things doesn't belong. Okay? And everyone disliked that. This was grossly disliked. And so this was very, very verbally disliked on all social media and etc. And guess what they said? What their response was?
Small text, it's fine print, like it's not fine design.
No. Their response was, the canvas bag was too expensive for us to make.
What? Who says that?
In recompense, here is 500 atoms, which is $5 of their FACO currency, which allows you to not even buy this type of bag in the game itself. The equivalent bag in the game for your character to wear around their waist is 800 atoms. Needless to say, this led to a whole bunch of legal questions in terms of lying to your customers. And that wasn't even the beginning of the issues with the Fallout 76 launch. Because then they looked around and they had a whole bunch of influencers on Twitter and etc., those that showed up to these pre-launch events. Guess what they got for free?
Good bags.
A nice canvas bag. So this is Doug Yee, and that's, I guess, one of his handles on there. That's what he was given for free at one of their events. We don't have the money to make canvas bags. No, but you've got the money to give them away.
That's one is marketing.
Yeah, I know. They burnt all their money on these bags that they made in the pre-orders. Okay. Then they launched a buggy mess. And yes, I'm willing to accept a certain amount of bugs. It's a very old game engine. But there's one thing that you probably want to do, and that is unit testing, right? Inside of the game, there's the ability to launch nuclear missiles. There are 3 nuclear missiles that can be launched. Guess what they never thought would happen, to the point where they didn't put a test as to whether it would crash their server. 3 nuclear missiles launching at the same point. This is the picture before this person's computer crashed. And they asked Bethesda, why did this happen? Why did you not unit test for this? And they said, well, we thought it was a very low probability chance of happening.
You're putting nuke in your game.
Which, if you know anyone, if you know gamers, what's the first thing that gamers try to do? Everything, break it. Right? This is why Hamnet's going playtest. This should have been a test case. And so basically what I've been able to try to, figure out why did this happen, why did this break, is what happens is every time a nuke hits, it raises the level cap of all of the enemies around. So what happened was it raised level cap 3 times, and then it didn't know what to do. It's like spawn a level 476 Scorch Beast, but it only goes up to 150. Crash. And down it went. Guess how long it took for a group of after launch. So first of all, the beta was just a mess. The beta was not even a beta. The beta was just 3-4 hours of people going on and doing this. So you didn't have the time to do this. Guess how long it took from the initial launch of the game for them to crash it with this case? 10 minutes. 10, okay, not that quick. Several hours. Within about the first week, this happened. Okay? And again, this is why you playtest your game and why you have an actual beta test. And why you don't just look at the levels of, the low-level players. You look at high-level players who are able to complete what is considered basically the end game mission of Fallout 76. So, yes, don't launch 3 nukes in Fallout 76 at the same point as the outcome of this, but now they fixed it. Then, Fallout. Okay. They found a developer room. So what happens? And this has been found, these have existed in Skyrim, these have existed in Fallout 3, in Fallout New Vegas, in Fallout 4, and people have found these developer rooms left in the game. And the developer room is basically the secret magical place in which everything in the game is. And the reason for this is when you have your playtesting team in-house, you don't want them to have to hunt around for loot or go through missions or do whatever. You want to see what will happen if I combine this and this and this. And so they have basically a secret, it's like the room in the Matrix. You know when they go in the back door in the Matrix and they come in and they say, we need guns. And out comes that big, huge thing of guns, and they can select whatever guns that they want, or they have that thing that says, geez, I need you, can you fly a helicopter? I can now. Whoa, I know Kung Fu. That's the developer room. That is the actual purpose of the developer room, is to very quickly get access to this. Now, if you're doing a single-player game, and you're a single player and you use console commands to jump into developer room, what happens?
You can just load previous save and like...
You can load a previous save, or you just go into it, you grab some stuff, and you have a fun time messing around with it or whatever. Does it affect anyone else? No. Right? Does it matter if you mess up your own progression? No, it's a cheat code, right? It's like cheat codes where you could have the invincibility code. And you play around with it for a few minutes and then you go, this isn't fun anymore, and then you go up and you do something else. But what happens when it is a multiplayer experience?
Other players start using it.
Oh, yes they do. And not only this, but if you're the guy who can magically get into this room and get all of these high-powered, because it has every item in the game.
Developers like my accomplishment. Like I grinded the rig to get this item, and you're just
exactly. And the other bit that you can do with this, and people are starting to sell it. Okay, so with this, what would a rational game development company do? Remove it, right? You have. You know, how many flags have we seen in our IDEs where it says release version, and it's, testing version, and then you have this room on the release version, you have a flag in the code that basically says, do not put this into the release version. How many people, before I even said that, were going, why didn't they just do that? Right? Just remove it. It's a multiplayer game, you don't need it. You don't even need it in the single player game. Why is it still there? In the single-player game. No one will find it. No, they found it. They found it without the console. Because it's simple. Players will do everything to break your game.
clicking through textures.
Right? Where if you give them the ability to access it, they will. If you leave it in, they will. How did Bethesda handle it? Huh? They started banning players. They went out and basically said, how did you get into our magical room? Tell us how you got into your magical room. Until you tell us, we're banning you. So they don't even know how players are getting into their magic room. Much less patch it out. And so they're banning accounts because of this. So it's just, again, it's on the player rather than on the developer to make a good game. Oh boy, okay. And the biggest problem here is they took an old single-player engine, they repurposed it. So mods had to be stopped, balanced, left in the developer playroom though. Balance. And inside of it, you also don't have this proper player versus environment. There's all sorts of issues with the bugs. There's the look down glitch that they're able to do via capping your frame rate, because no one wants to actually, utilize that big fancy computer that they got. So yes, Bethesda has problems. Okay, so I got to the end of this. I talked about 3 different companies and kind of things out there. What does this say to you guys today? As developers, as potential future developers, all of these led to huge PR debacles for their various companies that they're still working through, and they're still have massive foot and mouth disease. So a couple of suggestions. One, do what you say you're going to do, especially for Bethesda, right? If you say you're going to give them that, do it. It's better to take some more time to develop the product, usually. Is that the alarm? Have I gone over time?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Shut up, Joey.
Okay. Respond to your users. One of the big things with this is they've been very PR responsive. And don't believe that games are just a get-rich-quick scheme. For players, and we heard this earlier, don't pre-order. You're just encouraging it. Watch out for companies with such labor practices, and watch out for such games that have these kind of, tricky loot boxes. Okay. If you want to know more about my lab, what I'm up to, that's my paper profile. So there you pretty much find all of my papers. I list them for free for the world in order to learn more about what we're up to. That's my Twitter account and my email. And as Hannah stated earlier in the day, we also have a book launch that's going to be coming out sometime over the summer on playtesting. And the other thing is we're hiring in the lab. So I generally have a big pile of projects for those of you that are students who require thesis work, want to do internships. But we also have a professor/professor of practice positions open. So for those who have a PhD in their back pocket, or for those that have long-time industry experience in game dev, there's positions right now at Annapolis that are available for that. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and again, thank you for showing up at the Annapolis Game Jam, and to the developers for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Brown, for this amazing lecture. And I think we'd like to continue with some sort of socialization, like team building. So, and here we have Elizabeth channel that will direct you